Hey everyone, so I'm here to share what I've learned so far from chapters 5 through 8 in interpersonal communication. So, highlighting chapter 5, some of the things that really stood out to me is the idea that language is symbolic. So, it's pretty crazy that they're just arbitrary symbols that have no meaning in themselves. So, when you think about, like the book says, the word five, five only means five because we agree that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But other than that, it has no meaning behind it other than that's what we all agree upon. So I thought that was pretty crazy to think about. A tree is simply a tree because, we've named it a tree and we've agreed that that's what it's called. But it doesn't have any symbolic meaning behind it. So also the idea of phonological rules, syntactic rules, semantic rules, and pragmatic rules. So, phonological rules are how things are pronounced. So, champagne, for example, is how we pronounce it in English, but it's pronounced different in France or in Italy, as the book points out. So the different idea of how things are pronounced. And then syntactic rules distinguishes the way in which a sentence is made up. So depending on the sentence structure, it could convey a different meaning. So you have to be cognizant of that. And then there's also semantic rules, which is the meaning of the word. So as the book points out, we understand that you ride a bike and you read a book. So it's just the idea of the meaning behind an object. And then pragmatic rules is just the context behind it. If you say, I want to see you, your boss says that, you might be in trouble. But if your boyfriend says that, then you know that he just misses you and wants to see you. It's also pretty cool, the idea of naming an identity that language has. So it's weird to think that people know me as Caroline and that's what defines me. When people say the word Caroline Robbins, that is a defining factor for me, even though it's just simply one word or two words. So that's pretty cool. And then the idea, another thing of politeness and politeness and power, is that politeness is trying hard to be, sometimes people try too hard to be polite that you don't exactly get your point across. So it comes off as seeming powerless because you aren't very direct. So that's like the difference between, for example, Japan and the United States. In Japan, they kind of save face for harmony. They like to be more polite with words, whereas in the United States, when people are too polite, it might just be coming off as you're beating around the bush. Okay, so then moving on to chapter 6, nonverbal communication. So I think it's pretty cool that all behavior has a communicative value. So while I was sitting in the Plaza of Americas, I could tell just by looking at people's different nonverbal interactions kind of what they were thinking and feeling. People were hugging and I could tell that they were friends, they were close. People sometimes would give wide eyes to the person they were talking to as if surprised or worried. One particular boy I saw was slunched over, kind of rubbing his head, and I could tell he was either sad or stressed. So it also is the idea of nonverbal communication can be ambiguous. So I might have seen this guy rubbing his head and slouching. He could have been tired. He could have been sad. He could have been frustrated. So it's kind of ambiguous. You can't be certain what it means, but it is communicating something. So I also think it's pretty cool how nonverbal communication can just demonstrate the kind of relationship you have. So maybe with someone you wave, you're kind of friendly, you hug, you're really, really close, you shake hands. It could be a formal interview. You wouldn't go in there and hug someone who is, interviewing you and is kind of in a position or status above you. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then the idea also of gender differences is something that really stands out to me. Not only in the United States, you often see girls hugging each other and boys shaking hands, but when I visited France, boys would simply just say hello, but girls would kiss each other on the cheek, and boys to girls would also kiss each other on the cheeks. So just the difference between girls and boys is really interesting as well. One thing that really stood out to me that was cool is the idea that clothing can influence how we perceive someone. So a lot of times clothing can tell about our economic level, our education level, our someone's trustworthiness or their social position just by what they're wearing. If you see a man in a suit, you can tell, he might have a pretty important job. If you see a woman wearing a Chanel bag and Michael Kors, you could tell she's a little bit more on the wealthier end. So I thought that was pretty cool that can tell a lot about a person. And then chapter 7, the idea of listening. I really thought it was cool how it pointed out that so often this idea that we listen mindlessly rather than mindfully, and I definitely think that's true. I think there's so much information overload. We have our own personal thoughts. It said that, as well as our rapid thought things constantly going through our head, what we have to do next. So we're not always thinking about, what that other person's saying. So I think it's really important to listen carefully. And I was most comfortable with the idea of supporting and empathizing. I really like giving that person that feeling of comfort that they need, because that's something that I enjoy when someone's listening to me. And then I'm not so comfortable with questioning and silent listening. I feel like they think I'm not being receptive, and it makes me feel a little uncomfortable and awkward if I'm questioning them. I think they think that I'm being judgmental when I am not. I'm just simply clarifying. And then the last, I thought the idea of emotions in chapter 8 was pretty cool, how they can have such an effect on our physical being, our physical makeup. I suffer from pretty bad panic attacks, so I've seen this firsthand. When I start getting panicky, I'm very shaky. I have trouble breathing. My heart races. I have trouble seeing. So it's really crazy how simple emotions can affect physiological aspects of ourselves. And then just the idea also that emotions are so different depending on gender was something that really stood out to me. Women are very attuned to emotions. They are more likely to express their emotions than men. And I've seen that kind of firsthand because I'm much more emotional than a lot of guys that I know. However, it is funny that it can be different because my dad is much more emotional than my mom is. He's the one who is always empathizing, and I think I get that from him, whereas my mom is a little bit more, the hard edge or the hard arrow. And then I also thought the idea of personality affecting emotions was pretty cool. I'm a true color blue all the way. I'm very emotional, very empathetic, and I think a lot of my personality plays into the way I feel emotions and perceive others' emotions. So I really enjoyed these chapters, and I hope that my little recap helped you. Thank you.